Warmest blessings, and this is Master Shaman Palai Chi. Welcome to Ep.5, Becoming a Shaman in a Domestically Violent Environment. Now, I aim to bring you value on my channel, and if you have found that this is true, if you could do me a small favor and pay it forward by clicking the like, subscribe, and notification buttons, it's totally free to do so. So help do it now. Becoming a shaman in a domestically violent environment can be very difficult and so draining in energy, especially if you are having to consistently deal with spiritual negativity or people who are susceptible to it. Now, these people may not be negative all the time, but they are very susceptible to it. So they can hold the negativity within them without really noticing it. These kinds of people end up traumatizing you. And the biggest thing is keeping your vibrational thermostat at a higher vibration of positivity while being challenged to do so in this type of environment, especially if you do not make or have the space to gain a peace of mind. Over 18 plus years ago, after being prompted to by spirit to be proactive and going public about my shamanic journey and experiences, I didn't get to make a decision. Rather, a decision was made for me spiritually, and I went with it, never looking back. It was the best choice and the only choice I felt at the time that I had to make because of my life and its turning point that I was in. After many years of spiritual illnesses, having going through stomach aches, ongoing headaches, and different aches of the body, right before going to school as a 6-year-old growing up and up until the age of 18 years old, was very daunting. Then to deal with domestic violence was another thing on my plate. I felt that it was another thing I had to put in my backpack to hold. That I didn't feel like I signed up for, but I did. I've never really had to deal with domestic violence throughout the years as a daughter to my parents. Never had seen what it actually meant until I got married. Life was good then, and it was on some days, and it wasn't on some. So, not to say that it was a bad marriage or anything, and that my marriage was not great. It was loved. There was a lot of love. There was a lot of connection. There was a lot of passion with each person and in the relationship, and still is to this day. But I want to talk about this because I know that some of you out there are going through becoming a shaman and in an environment that it's causing you a lot of trauma and some emotional breakdowns on some days. Now, it's not all the time, but it's some days. And those some days could be 1 or 2 days per week, once a week, or a couple times a month. And even with my inexperience when I was 18 years old, and I was with someone who's been domestically violent, I would stay calm. And at the time, my soul spoke to me without me really knowing. But looking back, I know now that my soul was speaking to me and telling me that you don't have to be afraid. And this person is very scared and needs your help. So I lean towards comforting this person rather than continuing to argue or yell with them to the max. And some days, trust me, it's not all perfect. And at first, I did argue. I tried to make my points that I was being righteous, right? That whatever he said, it was not what I was trying to say. And that we were making the same point, but we just have a different way of saying it. But all of a sudden, one day, it dawned on me that though my psychic gifts were within me, in telling me to stop trying to make a point, I let my ego keep on going to prove a point. But heads start to butt. Each person feels they are not heard. And so the more that I made my point, the more that we kept arguing. And he kept making his points as well. And each person was basically making the same point, but we were just saying it in different ways, right? So I let my ego keep on, going to prove a point. And that was not healthy because I didn't come from a family that had this type of trauma with domestic violence. So I was actually very scared inside. And it felt that each person is not being heard. So we just kept yelling louder and higher and more. And it just got to the point where it was hurting our relationship so badly. Sometimes we wouldn't get into any violence or violent argument, and other times it got really bad. But finally, around the time when I got to the point of my life or death situation, I found a miracle. Or maybe the miracle found me, actually. And this miracle was actually coming in to help my relationship with this person who I dearly loved. And I believed that he loved me tremendously as well. Otherwise, by going through the storms that we went through, we would be done way early on, like I would say 3 years into our marriage or so, or maybe even the first year, we would not have last. But something negative just kept getting in our way. And as I felt that he could not hear my true words when we were arguing and the heat of the moment, all that I kept hearing from him was what I perceived as lies, which some were. And he just kept making his points and I kept making mine. So it didn't work in the heat of the moment, right? But when it got good and everything calmed down, it was very loving, it was very caring. It was like as though we could not live without one another, as though we were tied by our souls together. So this was me going through my early years and into the early years of my shamanic journey. And like I told those who I love, then and now, that I cannot live with people who lie. I cannot live with liars. And if you're going to be dishonest with me, I'd rather move on without you. I made this proclamation because I met my fair share of dishonesty and betrayal early on with friends and relatives. So, can you imagine being with your close relatives and being betrayed and being lied to? And at the same time, you are friends with them, like very good friends. So, in going back to my story, I'm going to make a point from a shamanic root cause standpoint today. And to convey this clearly that domestic violence typically has nothing to do with you if you are the victim initially. So, this is initially, right? So, at the beginning, but it is very related to most times if it's stemming from the angry memories of a personal trauma or traumas of the person who is conducting domestic violence and who is being domestically violent, right? This is conduct of anger that has built up and formed into a huge ball and is ready to be unleashed when necessary. And it may not all be unleashed in one conversation or argument. It may be unleashed over time within a relationship. So if you are one of those victims to domestic violence or the conductor of it, both, either or, both need to take a step back in silence and look at yourselves and the situation. What was the root cause of the whole situation? What was the questions asked? Or what was the whole point of even arguing over little piddly things like who's going to wash the dishes or who should take out the trash? The victim needs to stop trying to defend themselves or make a point immediately, which takes practice. I'm not going to say it's easy, not going to lie. It takes a ton of practice to actually stop yourself from arguing with someone who is susceptible to negativity. But why would you know this? Because When you talk to 5 people and there's only one person that is the one that you're arguing the most with, that is the one that is the more susceptible. And perhaps they have a whole different point of view on life. And maybe it's the same point of view, but said in a different way. So you both have common ground points, but you are saying it in different ways. Therefore, it is a miscommunication. And this takes practice to actually get used to, not just getting used to just and like ignoring, right? But to proactively help yourself to say, I'm not going to continue defending myself anymore or making my points because it's not going to get anywhere. If the trauma is still going to be with the person that you are arguing with, whether you are on the domestic violence side and you're the conductor of it or you are the victim of it. So the conductor of domestic violence needs to drop it basically and wake up to reality. The fact is that an old trauma is being triggered through a negative thought or words the victim may have said or similarly to which caused upon the violent action. So this violent action is possibly a reaction of the person performing the domestic violence because they are not feeling safe or they have been done onto them the same thing that they are doing onto you as the victim. So, according to personal experience and the many spiritual diagnoses with past clients, this has happened and this has been found to happen over and over and over again. But with the person who is having the unresolved or critical trauma that comes with them or in them and is still stuck in them, that still needs to be unleashed, they are fearing and of having safety and they are fearing of security. That's why they are bringing on the act of violence. Typically, I'm not going to say it's 100%. This is the typical answer that I have found through personal experience and through past clients. So, being a shaman who lived and is healing through this kind of environment and can still function the way I do, at the end of the day, only love, kindness, and compassion taught to me by my soul and my spiritual guides can override, and forgiveness can help to overcome these violent acts. Even if it must be pretended or practiced, and you heard me right, even if you have to pretend, because pretending will help you to become, and practice it correctly in several instances over and over again. Why? Because you love the person enough to do so, to be patient enough to do so. And it becomes, later on, you become true humbleness. This person with true humbleness, because it becomes you. The kindness, the love, and the compassion. Not to say that you already have this in you, but most people that have it in them may not practice it enough. So therefore, they don't come off as loving, as kind, or as compassionate because they do not show it enough. So therefore, humbleness is not there. It may be there inside of them at times or always, but once you don't show it and you do not practice it, then it's not there for the other people to see or to feel from you. So when my time came, the benevolent spirit guides of Shou Shi Yi is one of the first humans who was a shamanic healer, according to monk folktale and my spiritual knowledge. He descended upon me and spoke through me, literally spoke through me and through my throat, and disciplined me as the victim of domestic violence, right? I was a victim of domestic violence. He disciplined me along with all my spiritual team and through my heart and soul to not only heal those with the same kind of trauma of being domestically violent, right? People with this type of trauma and who causes this type of domestic violence, that I would need to deal with these people in my life because I would have the patience to do so and I would understand them at the same time. But those who are running within this karmic cycle, when I began my shamanic journey, are those that I deal with in my personal life and with clients as well. That either they are one or the other. They are either the conductor of domestic violence or they are the victim of domestic violence. Something, anything that had to do with violence, whether it was sexual, right? Or whether it was a harassment type, it doesn't matter. As long as it had to deal with domestic violence, I had to deal with that. And I seem to deal with these type of situations a lot. Could that be something with my karma as a shamanic healer? And I would say very well so. When I was a kid, at the age of 4 years old, I was bullied and bullied by 5 boys. And one of them came and the boy liked me a lot. So his friend came up to me and said, "Hey, this boy likes you a lot." And he pointed to that boy. And I said, "Well, I don't like him, right?" So I indicated that. This is 4 years old. I hardly spoke English at all, but I kind of knew what they were trying to indicate. And so I beat up the boy. I literally jumped on him and started punching him. I watched a lot of Bruce Lee movies. So I was very inspired by martial arts. And so I jumped on the boy and I basically beat him up because he said that he liked me and that he also, after I said I didn't like him, he also came back and said, really close to my face, that he was going to do something to me, as in threaten me of something, right? So I was pushed. I was pushed once, and then I pushed back, and then I beat him up. So, being a shaman later on, I knew why I had to go through this. So, when it came time, I was taught this by Shoshi Yi, and the other person that taught me this was also Jesus himself. So you see, becoming a shaman takes courage and understanding, even when you only have a drop or two left inside of you of kindness. What you have lots, but this is what you can give, right? There's this kindness, compassion, and love inside of you, but you can only give a drop or two to those who has hurt you, right? Or those who argue with you and then become domestically violent with you. Even when you are frightened and have been victimized, betrayed, and have been blamed for things that were not even what you did, and that you weren't even aware of that you had came off in that type of way. Because you actually didn't have negative intentions in doing any harm in doing so, right? And those who perform domestic violence upon you refuse to discern in the heat of the moment. So, this is in the heat of the moment due to what has been engraved in their thoughts since the inception of the negative act that they went through. So, they feel unsafe and insecure. And at the same time, it bothers them, it triggers them. If you were to say, I want to bring justice or I need to be righteous in this moment in time, and I want to put down my point and stepping into, taking a stand basically. And it cannot be argued with. Why? Because the trauma is in them is still there in their memory. So, which is the trauma that they still carry and have not yet been willing to forgive or let go of? So, they are susceptible to negativity. It's not that the victim is also perfect. they probably also are and do have and likely will have some trauma as well. It's just that the way they take it is a bit different from those that are susceptible to negativity. And the ones that are victimized can be susceptible to negativity as well in certain points in time if they are pushed, right? And that's when you have to come back to self. That's when you have to come back and say, what am I doing? And why is this argument still happening? Especially if it's the same points that are given each time that you argue or each time that you have a conversation and it gets triggered again. So, which will only take an outside form of invasive trigger, so an outside person or situation that has nothing to do with the relatives or with the family or with the people that you live with, such as someone they do not know personally, basically to show them in any way, shape, or form to wake up to their negative thoughts and actions that they've caused upon themselves and has affected others whom they loved. I learned this at 4 years old, but I was fighting for a right because I was pushed initially. But imagine those who go through this over and over and over again, where they had to really feel like they had to be domestically violent. And I'm not on either side, right? Either one could be the victim at times, and then either one could be the domestically violent person at times. But either way, you need to go back to love, kindness, compassion. And it doesn't even matter if you don't have any more to give. If you still have it in you, you will have at least an inch or two, a drop or two to give. And if you can give that, then pretend if you have to. And pretend the way through. You will eventually come back to yourself. You will eventually be kind, be compassionate, and be able to feel the love again. And I'm saying this from my own experience, especially going through situations that you have been hurt physically or mentally, emotionally. You need to come back to love. If you are on the spiritual path and you're still climbing to get there, but still not sure what you're doing, go check out and listen to the healing song link in the description below a few times. If you feel any vibrations or tingles or warmth inside of your body, then go to my 11x Enlightened training right after you listen to that song. It is also linked below. Warmest blessings, and until next time.